The morning sun shone through the windows of the UFS Discovery as Admiral Jake Morrison sipped his coffee. He looked out at the stars and smiled. Another peaceful day in the galaxy. For 3,000 years, humans had lived without war. Jake could not even imagine what fighting looked like. Dr. Lisa Harper walked into the bridge carrying her datapad. She was the ship's science officer, and she loved studying new planets and the creatures that lived on them. Today, they were heading to a world called Kepler 442b to see if it could support human life. "Good morning, Admiral," Lisa said with a bright smile. "The scans look promising. This planet has water and the right temperature for our people." Carlos Rivera, the ship's engineer, looked up from his workstation. "The terraforming equipment is ready to go. We can start preparing this world for families in just a few months." Amy Walsh, who handled all communications, was listening to radio signals from across the galaxy. Most of the chatter was about trade deals and scientific discoveries. The galaxy was full of different species, all living together in peace through the Galactic Council. Jake nodded and took another sip of his coffee. "Perfect. Schedule a meeting with the Council representatives on New Geneva. We'll need approval before we start any terraforming work." The Discovery was not a warship. It had no weapons, no shields, no armor. It was built for exploration and science. The ship carried doctors, teachers, engineers, and scientists. Jake's crew spent their days helping other species, finding new worlds, and making life better for everyone in the galaxy. On the planet below, Jake could see vast oceans and green continents. It reminded him of Earth, though he had never been there. Earth was now a museum world preserved exactly as it was when humans first reached the stars. Children went there on school trips to learn about the old days. "Admiral," Amy called out, "I'm getting a strange signal from the edge of our space. It's not like anything in our databases." Jake walked over to Amy's station. The signal was strong and seemed to be getting closer. "Can you translate it?" Amy worked at her computer for several minutes. Her face grew worried as she read the message. "Sir, it says they are the Zephyrian Empire. They demand that all species in this galaxy surrender immediately or face destruction." Carlos laughed. "Destruction? Who talks like that anymore?" "This must be some kind of joke." Lisa shook her head. "The signal is coming from outside our galaxy. These beings traveled a very long way to get here." Jake frowned. In 3,000 years, no one had threatened anyone in their galaxy. The idea seemed silly and old-fashioned. "Send a response, Amy. Tell them we're peaceful people and we'd like to meet them. Maybe they need help with something." Amy sent the message and waited. The reply came back quickly and her face went pale. "Admiral, they say they don't want to meet. They want us to kneel before their war prime Kithara, or they will burn our worlds." The bridge fell silent. Jake had read about war in history books, but it seemed like something from a fairy tale. People used to fight and kill each other thousands of years ago, but humans had grown beyond such things. "Get me President Helen Brooks on New Geneva," Jake ordered. A few minutes later, the president's face appeared on the main screen. She was an older woman with kind eyes and gray hair. She had been elected because she was good at solving problems and making people happy. "Hello, Jake. I heard about the message. The entire Galactic Council is in emergency session right now. What do they want us to do?" Jake asked. President Brooks smiled, which surprised Jake. "Nothing special. We're going to politely decline their offer." "Decline? But they threatened to destroy us." "Jake, you're young. You've lived your whole life in peace. That's wonderful, and that's exactly what we wanted for your generation." The president's eyes seemed to hold some secret knowledge. "But there are things about humans that you don't know yet. Things we chose to forget." Jake felt confused. What kind of things? The kind of things that are better left forgotten, unless they become necessary. President Brooks turned to speak to someone off-screen, then looked back at Jake. "Bring your ship home, Admiral. We have some old friends to wake up." The communication ended, leaving Jake and his crew staring at the blank screen. They had never seen the president act so strangely. She seemed almost happy about the threat. "What do you think she meant?" Lisa asked. Carlos shrugged. Maybe there are other ships we don't know about, secret defense forces or something. Amy was still monitoring the alien signals. Admiral, there are more ships coming through what looks like a wormhole. Hundreds of them. They're heading toward our outer colonies. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The peaceful galaxy he had known his entire life was about to change. But something about President Brooks's reaction bothered him. She had not seemed scared or worried. If anything, she had seemed almost amused. Set course for New Geneva, Carlos. Maximum speed. As the Discovery turned toward home, Jake wondered what secrets his own species was hiding. For 3,000 years, humans had been known throughout the galaxy as the quiet, peaceful people who helped everyone and hurt no one. But the president's smile suggested there was more to the story. Behind them, the alien fleet continued to pour through the wormhole, bringing war to a galaxy that had forgotten what the word meant. But perhaps, Jake thought, forgetting and being unable to remember were two very different things. The Galactic Council building on New Geneva was in chaos. Representatives from dozens of species filled the Great Hall, all talking at once. The peaceful galaxy they knew was under threat, and no one knew what to do. Ambassador Roy Patterson sat quietly in his chair while others shouted and argued. He was Earth's representative to the Council, a calm man with white hair who had held the job for 50 years. While alien delegates panicked around him, Roy seemed almost bored. The Altarian representative stood up, his blue skin turning darker with fear. We must surrender. These Zephyrians have weapons we cannot match. Our ships are built for science and trade, not war. The Centaurian delegate agreed. Yes, we should negotiate. Perhaps we can give them some empty systems to keep them happy. Roy finally spoke, his voice cutting through the noise. I request a recess. I need to check some old files. The council leader, a tall being from Rigel, looked confused. Files? At a time like this? Ambassador Patterson, we need to make a decision now. Roy stood up slowly. Trust me. Give me 2 hours. Roy left the building and walked to the Terran Federal building across the plaza. Dr. Nina Cross was waiting for him in the lobby. She was a historian who worked in the archives, a quiet woman who spent her days reading old documents and preserving human history. Nina, I need access to the restricted archives, the ones from before the long peace. Nina's eyes widened. Roy, those files haven't been opened in 3,000 years, are you sure? Very sure. They took an elevator down, far below the city streets. The elevator went down for several minutes, taking them deep into the planet's crust. Finally, the doors opened to reveal a corridor lined with quantum storage vaults. Nina placed her hand on a scanner. These archives contain everything about humanity's military history. Wars, weapons, battle tactics, everything we chose to leave behind. The first vault opened with a soft hiss. Inside were data crystals containing the complete records of human warfare, from the first stone axes to the last great conflict that ended the Age of War. Roy picked up a crystal labeled Final Earth War Council, Closing Statement. He placed it in a reader, and words appeared on the screen. We have seen what we become when we embrace our nature as warriors. We have weapons that can break planets and strategies that can destroy entire civilizations. Today, we choose to put down our arms not because we lost, but because we won too completely. We won against every enemy except ourselves. Nina read over his shoulder. The records show that humans didn't stop fighting because they were weak. They stopped because they were too good at it. Roy continued reading. The files contained blueprints for weapons that could manipulate gravity, devices that could phase matter out of existence, and tactics that treated entire star systems like chessboards. The final entry made him pause. Should the galaxy ever face extinction from an external threat, these archives will serve as a reminder of who we were and who we can become again. We pray that day never comes, but if it does, we will remember. Roy closed the file and looked at Nina. Contact General Frank Hudson. Tell him the long peace is ending. General Hudson lived on a quiet farm on the edge of New Geneva, At 300 years old, he looked like any other elderly human, tending to his garden and reading books. But the files showed his real history. He had been humanity's greatest military mind before the peace began. When Nina's call came, Frank was feeding his chickens. He listened to her message without surprise, as if he had been waiting for it his whole life. "I understand," Frank said. "Send the activation codes to the old guard. It's time to wake up." Across human space, similar calls went out. Museum curators who had once commanded fleets received coded messages. Teachers who had been tactical geniuses got phone calls. Farmers who had been legendary warriors found notes in their mailboxes. Beth Kelly was running a small colony on the outer rim when her message arrived. She had been an administrator for 200 years, helping families settle new worlds. But before that, she had been something else entirely. Greg Santos was captain of a research vessel, studying gas giants in the Vega system. His ship carried scientists and students, not soldiers. But the message he received made him remember skills he had thought were long forgotten. Back in the archives, Roy and Nina kept reading. They found records of the human military philosophy that had made them so effective. Humans didn't just fight wars, they studied them like a science. They learned from every battle, adapted to every enemy, and never forgot a lesson. "Look at this," Nina said, pointing to a file about human psychology. "It says here that humans are naturally curious about everything, including warfare. They don't just learn to fight, they learn why fighting works." Roy nodded. "And they're patient. They can wait for the right moment to strike." The archives revealed humanity's greatest secret. They had not chosen peace because they were naturally peaceful. They had chosen it because they understood the true cost of war better than any other species in the galaxy. When Roy returned to the council building, the other representatives were still arguing. The Zephyrian fleet had destroyed 2 research outposts on the galaxy's edge, and panic was spreading. "Ambassador Patterson," the council leader called out, "have you found a solution in your files?" Roy smiled for the first time that day. "Actually, yes, I have a message from President Brooks." The room fell silent as Roy activated a communication device. President Brooks appeared on the main screen, still looking calm and composed. "Representatives of the Galactic Council," she began, "I want to thank you for 3,000 years of peace and cooperation. It has been the greatest period in human history." The Altarian representative interrupted. "President Brooks, what are you going to do about these invaders?" President Brooks's smile grew wider. "We're going to remind them that there's a reason the galaxy has been peaceful for so long, not because we couldn't fight, but because we chose not to." The transmission ended, leaving the council in stunned silence. Roy gathered his papers and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" the council leader asked. "To watch humanity remember who we used to be," Roy replied. "And trust me, it's going to be educational for everyone involved." The first Zephyrian attack came at dawn on the colony world of New Harmony. War Prime Cathera had chosen this target because it looked defenseless. The planet was home to farmers, teachers, and craftsmen. Their cities had no walls, no weapons, no defenses that the Zephyrians could see. Beth Kelly was in her garden when the alien ships appeared in the sky. She had been watering her tomatoes, enjoying the peaceful morning. But when she saw the dark shapes blocking out the sun, something changed inside her. Memories that had been sleeping for centuries began to wake up. The Zephyrian ground forces landed in the town square, expecting to find frightened civilians. Instead, they found Beth waiting for them with a smile on her face. "Welcome to New Harmony," she said politely. "I'm Colony Administrator Kelly. How can I help you today?" The Zephyrian commander, a large creature with thick armor and many weapons, laughed at her. "You can help by surrendering. This world now belongs to the Empire." Beth nodded thoughtfully. "I see. Well, that's going to be a problem." "Problem? You have no weapons, no army, no defenses. What problem could you possibly create?" Beth's smile grew wider. "The problem is that you don't understand what you're dealing with. See, we're not just colonists, we're humans, and humans don't forget things. We just choose not to remember them until we need to." The Zephyrian commander raised his weapon, but Beth was already moving. She rolled behind a fountain and pressed a hidden button. Throughout the colony, alarms began to sound. But these were not panic alarms. They were wake-up calls. Every human on New Harmony had received the same message that morning. The long peace was ending. It was time to remember who they really were. The school teacher who had been reading to children 5 minutes ago was now setting up sniper positions on the school roof. The baker who had been making bread was mixing explosives in his kitchen. The children who had been playing in the park were running home to get equipment their parents had kept hidden for 3,000 years. The Zephyrians found themselves fighting an enemy they could not understand. Every building became a fortress. Every street became a trap. Gardens that had looked peaceful and beautiful turned into killing fields with hidden weapons and deadly surprises. But the strangest thing was that the humans were laughing. They fought like they were playing a game they had been waiting their whole lives to play again. In space above New Harmony, Captain Greg Santos received his own wake-up call. His research ship, the USS Perseverance, had been studying ice formations in the outer system. But when the message came, Greg's crew began to transform their peaceful vessel into something the Zephyrians had never seen before. Dr. Martinez, Greg called to his science officer. Remember those gravity wave experiments we've been running? Dr. Martinez, a woman who had spent 50 years studying peaceful applications of gravity manipulation, smiled. You mean the ones that could theoretically crush a ship by creating artificial black holes? Those are the ones. Fire them up. Carlos Rivera, who had been reassigned to Santos's ship, worked frantically to install weapon systems that had been built from mining equipment and scientific instruments. The Perseverance had no armor, no shields, and no traditional weapons. But it had something much more dangerous: human creativity awakened by necessity. The Zephyrian fleet commander watched his ships explode one by one, destroyed by weapons that should not exist. The human research vessel was using gravity itself as a weapon, creating space-time distortions that crushed his strongest ships like tin cans. What are these devices? He demanded over the radio. Greg's voice came back, calm and amused. Oh, these? We call them mining tools. We use them to move asteroids around. But they work pretty well on spaceships too. On the planet below, Beth, Kelly coordinated the defense of New Harmony with the same skills she had once used to plan the liberation of entire worlds. The memories were coming back now. 3,000 years of suppressed knowledge flowing through her mind like water through a broken dam. She had been a Special Forces operative during the last Great War. She had planned missions that saved billions of lives and ended conflicts that could have destroyed civilizations. After the peace, she had chosen to become a simple colony administrator, helping families build new lives on distant worlds. But she had never forgotten how to fight. None of them had. The Zephyrian ground commander found himself trapped in what had once been a peaceful town square. His forces were being picked off by invisible enemies who struck from everywhere and nowhere. Children threw toys that exploded. Old men fired weapons that bent space and time. Women used gardening tools that could cut through the strongest armor. This is impossible, he radioed to his fleet. These are not soldiers. They're farmers and teachers. Beth's voice came through his communicator. She had hacked into his system using skills she had learned as a young woman fighting cyber wars. That's where you're wrong. We're farmers and teachers now. But we used to be something else. We used to be very, very good at war. The battle for New Harmony lasted 3 days. When it was over, the Zephyrian forces had been completely defeated. Not a single human had been killed, but the alien survivors would never forget what they had seen. War Prime Kithara received the reports from New Harmony with growing concern. Her forces had faced primitive weapons and untrained civilians, but somehow they had been destroyed by an enemy that seemed to appear from nowhere and disappear just as quickly. But the most disturbing part of the reports was not the defeat itself. It was the attitude of the humans. They were not angry or desperate. They were having fun. General Frank Hudson's voice came through on all Zephyrian communication channels. The old farmer spoke in a calm, friendly tone that somehow made his words more frightening than any battle cry. Attention, Zephyrian Empire. This is General Hudson of the Terran Defense Forces. I want to thank you for reminding us who we used to be. It's been 3,000 years since we've had a proper war, and we're starting to get bored. Cathera tried to respond, but Hudson continued. You see, we didn't choose peace because we were weak. We chose it because we were too good at war. We got so good at it that we scared ourselves. So we decided to try something else for a while. The Shiu general's laughter echoed across space. But you've gone and reminded us why we were so good at it in the first place. We're humans. We don't just fight wars. We perfect them. Cathera felt fear for the first time in her life. She had attacked what she thought was a galaxy full of weak, peaceful species. Instead, she had awakened something that had been sleeping for 3 millennia. What do you want? She finally asked. What do we want? Hudson's voice was still friendly, still amused. We want you to understand that you made a mistake. A very big mistake. You started a war with the one species in this galaxy that actually knows how to fight one. The communication ended, leaving Cathera staring at reports of impossible defeats across a dozen worlds. Her mighty empire was being torn apart by farmers and teachers who fought like they had been born for war. Because she was beginning to realize they had been. The war was no longer going as War Prime Cathera had planned. Reports flooded in from across human space, each one more impossible than the last. Her mighty fleets were being destroyed by ships that should not exist, using weapons that defied everything the Zephyrians knew about warfare. Field Marshal Claire Davis stood in the command center on New Geneva, watching the battle reports with satisfaction. She was a small woman with gray hair who had spent the last 2 centuries teaching children at the local school. But before the long peace, she had been humanity's greatest military strategist. Admiral Morrison, report, Claire said into her communicator. Jake Morrison's voice came back from the UFS Discovery, which had been transformed overnight into something the galaxy had never seen. The Centauri system is secure, Marshal. The enemy fled after we demonstrated the new dimensional weapons. Claire smiled. Jake was learning quickly. Yesterday, he had been a peaceful explorer who had never seen combat. Today, he was commanding weapons that could strike targets from other dimensions. What about the captured Zephyrian officer? Claire asked. We have him in the medical bay. Dr. Harper is treating his wounds. The prisoner was a mechanic named Dan Cooper who had been captured during the battle for New Harmony. But Dan was not an ordinary mechanic anymore. Like all humans, he was remembering skills he had learned long ago. Dan sat calmly in the medical bay while the Zephyrian officer, Commander Vex, glared at him with hatred and fear. You're just a repair worker, Vex said. How did you defeat my elite soldiers? Dan looked up from the book he was reading. It was a simple story about farming, but his eyes held knowledge that made the alien commander nervous. Well, Dan said thoughtfully, I guess it's because you don't understand what humans really are. See, we're not just mechanics or farmers or teachers. We're problem solvers. And war is just another problem to solve. Impossible. Your species has lived in peace for thousands of years, Dan laughed. That's the funny part. We lived in peace because we got really, really good at war. We got so good that we scared ourselves into stopping. He closed his book and looked directly at the Zephyrian. Do you want to know what we're really capable of? Because what you've seen so far is just us stretching our muscles. Dr. Lisa Harper entered the medical bay carrying a data pad. She had been working on something special, using the same care she once used to preserve alien ecosystems to create weapons tailored specifically for Zephyrian biology. Dan, how is our guest? She asked politely. He's confused about how a peaceful species can be so good at war, Dan replied. Lisa smiled at Commander Vex. Oh, that's easy to explain. We spent 10,000 years learning how to destroy things perfectly. Then we spent 3,000 years learning how to build things perfectly. Now we can do both. She showed him her data pad. For example, I've been studying your species' biology. Did you know that your nervous system is vulnerable to a specific frequency of sound? I could create a weapon that would paralyze every Zephyrian in a star system without harming anyone else. Vex's eyes widened in horror. You would use biological weapons? Oh no, Lisa said cheerfully. We won't need to. We have much more interesting tools than that. Meanwhile, Engineer Carlos Rivera was working in the shipyards above New Geneva. Using manufacturing techniques perfected during the long peace, human workers were building ships that seemed to ignore the laws of physics. Carlos stood before a massive construction that looked more like a work of art than a warship. It could fold space around itself, move through time, and strike targets that existed in parallel dimensions. "How long until the fleet is ready?" asked General Hudson, who had arrived to inspect the work. "Another 6 hours," Carlos replied. "We're installing the consciousness transfer systems now." Hudson nodded. Project Lazarus was humanity's most secret weapon. Using technology developed during the peaceful years, they had awakened the digital minds of history's greatest military leaders. Alexander the Great, Napoleon Bonaparte, Sun Tzu, and dozens of others now existed as quantum consciousnesses, their tactical brilliance enhanced by 3,000 years of technological advancement. "The ancient minds are eager to see modern warfare," Hudson said. "They're fascinated by weapons that can manipulate reality itself." Back in space, the Zephyrian fleet made one last desperate attempt to break through human defenses. Kythera herself led the attack on the Sol system, hoping to strike at the heart of human civilization. But Earth was not defenseless. As the alien fleet approached, they found themselves facing something impossible. The planet itself was fighting back. Admiral Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of his ship as Earth's moon split open like a flower, revealing weapons that had been hidden for millennia. The space around Earth filled with defensive systems that treated the laws of physics as suggestions rather than rules. "This is impossible," Kythera broadcast on all frequencies. "A planet cannot be a weapon," President Brooks's voice answered, from Earth. "You're right. A planet can't be a weapon. But a planet built by humans who decided to hide their weapons inside it? That's something completely different." The battle was not really a battle at all. It was a demonstration. Human ships appeared and disappeared at will, striking from directions that did not exist. They used weapons that rewrote the laws of physics in localized space, creating zones where Zephyrian technology simply stopped working. But the most terrifying moment came when the humans did something unprecedented. They began to capture Zephyrian ships without firing a shot. Using tractor beams that could manipulate matter at the molecular level, human vessels simply reached out and took control of enemy ships, turning their own weapons against them. Commander Pete Rogers, who had been a peaceful merchant just weeks before, now commanded a fleet of captured Zephyrian vessels. He used their own ships to broadcast a message across the enemy fleet. "Attention, Zephyrian Empire. This is Commander Rogers of the Terran Defense Forces. We want you to understand something important. We're not angry at you. We're not even really trying yet." His voice was calm and friendly, which somehow made it more frightening than any threat. "See, we're curious about you. We want to study your technology, your tactics, your psychology, so we're going to keep some of your ships and crews for research purposes." Kythera felt a chill run through her body. These humans were not just defeating her forces. They were treating the entire war like an interesting science experiment. "What do you want from us?" she demanded. "What do we want?" Pete's voice was thoughtful. "We want you to understand that you made a choice when you came here. You chose to wake up the one species in this galaxy that perfected the art of war, and then chose to stop using it." The communication paused for a moment. "But here's the thing about choices. You can always make new ones. And we're about to give you some very interesting options to choose from." The Zephyrian fleet found itself surrounded by human vessels that had appeared from nowhere. They were trapped, outnumbered, and facing weapons they could not understand or counter. But instead of destroying them, the humans did something that shocked everyone in the galaxy. They stopped fighting and opened communication channels. "War Prime, Kythera," came General Hudson's gentle voice. "I think it's time we had a conversation about the future. Your future specifically." Kythera realized that the war was over, but somehow she suspected that the most important part was just beginning. The final battle took place in the void between galaxies, where the last of the Zephyrian home fleet made its desperate stand. War Prime Kythera commanded over 1,000 ships, the pride of her empire, in what she knew would be the last fight of the war. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UFS Eternal Peace, a ship that had been built in just 3 days using technology that seemed like magic. Around him, the human fleet spread across space like stars coming to life. Each ship was different, each one a masterpiece of engineering that broke every rule of physics the galaxy had known. "Admiral," Amy Walsh reported from her communication station, "the Zephyrian fleet is requesting terms for surrender." Jake looked at the screen showing Cathara's flagship. The proud war prime who had started this conflict now faced the complete destruction of everything she had built. But Jake felt no anger toward her, only sadness that it had come to this. "Tell her we'll accept her surrender," Jake said. "But first, she needs to see something." The human fleet began to move in ways that should have been impossible. Ships folded, space around themselves, appearing in multiple places at once. Others moved through time, striking targets before they had even fired. The Zephyrian sensors could not track weapons that existed in 17 different dimensions at the same time. But this was not a battle. It was a lesson. Human ships surrounded each Zephyrian vessel individually, using weapons that could have destroyed them instantly. Gravity manipulation devices that could collapse stars. Reality distortion fields that could erase matter from existence. Quantum weapons that could rewrite the laws of physics in localized space. Yet not a single shot was fired. "War Prime Cathara," President Brooks' voice came across all communication channels. "You wanted to see what humans are capable of in war. This is it. We could destroy your entire fleet in the next 30 seconds. We could crack your home planet like an egg. We could erase your species from history itself." Cathara watched her. Sensors as human ships demonstrated power beyond anything she had imagined. They moved through solid matter, appeared in multiple realities simultaneously, and wielded forces that could reshape the universe itself. "But we won't," President Brooks continued, "because this is who we chose to become 3,000 years ago. We learned that true strength isn't the ability to destroy your enemies, it's the ability to choose not to." General Frank Hudson's image appeared on Cathara's main screen. The old man looked tired but peaceful, like a grandfather talking to a confused child. "You see, Cathara, we've been exactly where you are now. We had the power to conquer everything, to rule the galaxy through fear and strength, and we almost did it." The general's eyes held depths of memory that spoke of terrible knowledge. "We built weapons that could destroy solar systems. We developed strategies that could break entire civilizations. We became so good at war that we conquered death itself, bringing back our greatest military minds to fight forever." On the quantum cores of human ships, the digitized consciousness of Alexander the Great observed the battle with fascination. Napoleon studied the tactical displays with admiration. Sun Tzu watched the enemy fleet with the eyes of a master, seeing students make their first attempts at his art. "We had everything," Hudson continued. "Ultimate power, perfect weapons, unbeatable strategies. But we learned something important. When you become too good at destroying things, you lose the ability to build them." Dr. Lisa Harper's voice joined the conversation from her research vessel. "We could have ruled the galaxy, but we chose to garden it instead. We could have been conquerors, but we chose to be builders. We could have been gods of war, but we chose to be teachers of peace." Cathara felt something she had never experienced before. Humility. These humans had achieved everything her empire had dreamed of, and then given it up voluntarily. Why? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why show mercy to those who showed you none?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Dan Cooper, the simple mechanic who had been captured on New Harmony, spoke from the medical bay of Jake's ship. "Because that's who we chose to be," Dan said simply. "We could have stayed as warriors forever. We could have conquered everything and ruled through fear. But we asked ourselves a question. What's the point of winning if you become something terrible in the process?" Commander Pete Rogers, who now controlled half of Cathara's captured fleet, added his own thoughts. "We learned that real victory isn't defeating your enemies. It's becoming something better than what you were when the fight started." President Brooks spoke again. her voice gentle but firm. You have two choices, War Prime Cathara. You can keep fighting and discover that everything you've seen so far was just us warming up, or you can join the Galactic Council and learn what we learned. That peace isn't the absence of strength. It's what happens when people strong enough to destroy everything choose to build something instead. The space around the Zephyrian fleet filled with human ships that defied understanding. Vessels that existed in multiple dimensions, weapons that could rewrite reality, and technology that treated the fundamental forces of the universe like tools in a workshop. Yet every human face on every screen looked kind, patient, and hopeful. We're not asking you to be weak, Field Marshal Claire Davis said from her command ship. We're asking you to be strong enough to choose something better than war. Kithra looked around at her remaining officers. These proud warriors who had followed her across the void between galaxies now stared at screens showing power beyond their comprehension, wielded by people who chose not to use it. If I surrender, Kithera asked, what happens to my people? Behind. Same thing that happened to us, General Hudson replied. You learn to build instead of destroy. You discover that creating things is much harder than breaking them, but infinitely more rewarding. Amy Walsh, monitoring communications across the fleet, reported that Zephyrian ships were beginning to power down their weapons, not because they were forced to, but because they were choosing to. We accept, Kithera said finally. We accept your offer to join your council, but I have one question. How do I know my people won't forget these lessons and start another war in 1,000 years? Jake Morrison smiled, the same gentle expression that had confused him when he first saw it on President Brooks's face weeks ago. Because we'll teach you the same thing we taught ourselves. The strongest people in the universe are the ones who choose to be gentle. The most dangerous warriors are the ones who choose to be gardeners. The war ended not with explosions or surrender ceremonies, but with human ships offering aid to damaged Zephyrian vessels. Medical teams crossed between fleets to treat wounded soldiers. Engineers shared technology that could repair ships and heal worlds. 6 months later, Jake Morrison stood in his garden on New Geneva, watching Zephyrian children play with human children in the park nearby. The galaxy had returned to peace, but it was a different kind of peace now. Everyone understood what maintained it. On his desk sat a small plaque with words that every human child learned. Si vis pacem, para bellum. If you want peace, prepare for war. And below it, in smaller letters, we prepared. We chose peace. Choose wisely. The Zephyrians had learned humanity's greatest secret. The true strength was not the ability to win every fight, but the wisdom to know which fights were worth having. And sometimes the greatest victory was choosing not to fight at all. In the end, the galaxy remained peaceful not because its people were weak, but because they were strong enough to choose mercy over vengeance, creation over destruction, and hope over fear. The long peace continued, protected by those who remembered the cost of war and chose to pay the price of peace instead.